How do you shape an onboarding function to allow for such diversity of people?
Well, that's a really good question. So I think what we would probably sum up and say there are some fundamentals at the heart of that. So the organisation and its functions and its motives, its reason for being, they are consistent across the board, whether you are an engineer in technology, whether you are in a customer-facing role at something like London's Transport Museum, or whether you're an engineer working on large infrastructure projects. We have a goal we call it keeping London moving. That is consistent.
Okay.
The divergence in terms of tone of voice, that's something which is fluid. Yeah. So we have from time to time large programs underway. So we might have something like a technology and data program called Project 2030 about really whizzy things like contactless technologies and stuff like that, and we will express that differently. And so I guess you could call that mission. So in each individual sort of business area and discipline, the mission varies slightly. And so the tone of voice might be different, and the way to engage with them is going to be different. So the way we engage with the technology and data community, slightly different to the way we engage with the engineering community in the onboarding process.
Yeah.
How much do you want to hear from us, and what do you want to hear does vary subtly according to what it is they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, that's as far as we've got with it. Where we think we're going next will be to get the technology to support that.
Okay.
So we've had an EVP project underway for some time. So we've kind of got our heads a little way round EVP. Our next thing will be how we manipulate that slightly for each of those markets. There's a lot about early careers at the moment. We know that's different. So again, for various reasons, the conversation we were just having, if you've got graduate programs, apprenticeship programs, you need to be next to them quite a bit to make sure they end up in the seats.
Yeah.
So the onboarding process for that has got to vary a little bit. Our operational roles on the other side of things, operational roles such as people on stations, we have a reason for keeping in touch with them and having them at the ready to fill training classes as they arise. So that onboarding journey has to be, again, slightly different, slightly more operational, but the fundamentals are still the same. There's a mission in there. There's a reason why we need you and a reason why you want to join us, and that's got to come out strongly all the way through. And if we're not honouring that ourselves through the onboarding process, they're going to know, and that's when you're going to start to get attrition, drop off, complaints, and difficulties filling your roles. And that, in the end, we're there to support that.
How did you, or are you, building the business case for investment into the evolution of your approach?
So this is something we have done. So about 3 years ago, we basically changed the way that we do our whole induction process. So one of the main reasons for doing that was because we were getting a lot of grumbles from the business about the time, because we used to do a 2-day face-to-face induction for each employee that joined. So we kind of, the way that we put our case together was we went out to the business and said, what is it that you want? What is it that you need? What are the key factors for you? So we collated all that information together, and overwhelmingly it was around time, because it was a 2-day induction, and also around cost, because as soon as someone joins, they want to get that person out onto a client site to start earning fees, and that was obviously stopping that from happening. So because of that, we basically changed our whole process from a 2-day induction to a 1-day induction. But yeah, the main way that we did that, I don't know how, I don't want to go into too much detail. Keep going, okay. So the main way that we did that is obviously by getting the business buy-in, because I think with anything like this, if you haven't got their buy-in, it's just not going to work. We got their buy-in. It was their problem that we had to fix. It was around cost, it was around time. So anything that we were going to do was going to benefit them. So what we then quickly started doing is solutionizing. What is it that we need to do to make this better, to make it work? So we worked with key people within all of the different business areas. And we decided that the way forward was to cut down the induction from 2 days to 1 day. Effectively, the way that we did that and what helped us to do that was Hollaroo, because what we now do is we have a 3-step process. So we have a pre-onboarding induction. So we have something called the Be Ready portal, and that's something that our new joiners can log on to before day one. So effectively, all the stuff that we used to show them on day one, like the history of Capgemini, pensions video, flexible benefits video, all that pretty boring stuff, to be quite honest, they can now do that in their own time before they've joined. And the beauty of that is that they've already then started building that relationship with Capgemini. They've started to understand what we're like as a company. And not only has that saved us so much time in the induction process, it's also kept them warm before they've actually joined. So for us, that was one of our key factors, and that's how we overcame it. And we're still working very closely with the business on that and getting their feedback constantly, and the new joiners as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Abby. Hugh, I think this is a good one for you. So we want to start collecting data to have metrics to measure success of onboarding. Where do we start and how do we get a baseline?
Get a system. I think the bit about getting a baseline is really important, because whenever we implement any of our systems, we strongly encourage people, you need to understand where you are right now, and lots of organisations don't understand where they are right now from the point of view of candidate satisfaction with the process, attrition rates, those things which are really, really important. So first step is you need to establish that baseline. What Capgemini do, which I think is really, really strong, is measure their candidate satisfaction at stages along the process. So you can not only just do it once, do it at the point of offer, at the point of starting, and then 3 and 6 months into the business, because that allows you to see how things are evolving and maybe identify activities within the business that are having an impact on that. And then once you've got the baseline and you've got, you're making changes, I think on our table, when we were doing the round table, one of the things that's really good about onboarding is you can experiment, because even if you get it horribly wrong, you've got those onboarders out the way, so you can do something different with the new people. So don't be afraid to experiment and try out new things and see how that impacts onto things like candidate satisfaction and attrition rates. Constantly experiment, constantly evolve.
Excellent. Anything you guys want to add to that?
Can I just build on that? So one of the things that we do is we do the feedback throughout, as Hugh was saying, but also after day one. So when we do our Be Inspired induction, we do a feedback form then. I would say every 2 weeks we make a change. Only a slight change it might be, but we make a change based on the feedback that we get. So we're not constantly using the same standard every 2 weeks when we do the induction.
So there's a question about the use of a technology in here. We like to have insight, the insight that data gives us.
Yeah.
And in my business, economy, financial prudence is key. We've got a head count. I mean, my team is an operational team. It provides a people-centric service, but it's an operational team. We have a volume of work at any one time. I was looking at it a minute ago. We have cases in the pipeline. We use the technology to break it down to task level. We made 3 commitments when we went on the journey we've been on creating our function. We said we would know what busy looks like. We said we would know what good looks like. And we said that we would bring as much science into it as we could, using data and using insights from that data to adjust what we do, so that whenever we get a question, we know we've got a good answer. As long as I've been involved in HR, there's been a challenge about it being taken seriously as a strategic driver for a business. And at the heart of that challenge has been that thing I just described, where we don't work the same way as they do, so they don't take us seriously. Well, we do work the same way as them, and when they hear us talk about this, that gives us the credibility that we need. And that gets us the buy-in when we start to have this conversation about what we should be doing with it. And before you know it, the discussions fill in the room.
Absolutely.
The test of that, where we find ourselves right now, is we're always in a transformation situation. Our organisation does evolve, even though its roots are 150 years old. It evolves. We are having one of those moments right now, but the function that we've spent 3 years building is going to sail right through it. So in the new world that is coming in a few months' time, my bit of it looks the same. It may not look the same in terms of arms and legs and a face and a 50-year-old face. It might not look like that, but it will look like the thing we've built in the last 3 years. And that's the ultimate test, because it wouldn't do if it wasn't just about right.
Do you think technology is necessary to deliver a brilliant onboarding experience?
I'm going to start.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, is it necessary? It would be wrong to say it's necessary, but it would be right to say it's hugely beneficial. And if you're going to try and do it without, you need to be in a certain place where you can get away with it's probably a bit of an overstatement. But if you're a very small operation, very people-centered, you've got time and you've got money and you can flex and adapt, you're maybe in a very changeable situation in terms of your market, your corporate landscape, you might get away with not using a technology. But I doubt if there are very many people in the room who tick that box. If you're not there, data's a big deal. It can provide you with huge insights, it saves money, it makes money, and you need a technology to give you that good data. You know, it's not easy, because you will need, as we were discussing on our table, you need to be in a position to optimize that technology, to exploit it fully, to draw insights from it. You need to partner quite closely with the technology provider. It needs to be someone who understands what you're trying to do, so that you can get the good advice that translates into a strategy. I wouldn't try and do it without, personally.
I suppose for me, it depends. It depends on the size of the organisation. Again, for me, the use of technology has absolutely helped us. And that's with the pre-onboarding as well as the day itself. So on the induction day, we use a lot of technology. We're a technology organisation. So therefore, when we have a new joiner, we want to show them that we are a technology organisation. So one of the things we're doing at the moment is we're introducing some augmented reality to our induction day. So we talk about key client stories that happen. So we talk about some of the great work that we do at Heathrow Airport, for example. But we're not just telling them about it. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be giving them an iPad. They'll put the iPad in front of a little aeroplane model, and then that aeroplane will have a video will pop up and then talk to them and tell them what is the great work that we've been doing. So you can use technology in a number of different ways when it comes to onboarding. So I don't know whether that question's based around pre-onboarding, during onboarding, or after, but I would say it's important, and I do think it gives you an edge. But if you are a very small company, I don't think you need it to deliver a good onboarding approach. I think as long as you're personable and you show them what the culture of the company is, and you kind of are with them from day one and don't just leave them by themselves, I think that's the basis of a good onboarding.
Well, I mean, I would say it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. So there's no point in having the best technology in the world if you don't have the people, because it is a very people. It's a people thing, onboarding, and if you don't have those people involved and those connections and those relationships, there's no point in having the technology. I would say what technology does is it enables you to scale that people side, so it enables you to keep that people heavy relationship building conversation happening as you grow. So you're absolutely right. If you're a tiny organisation, you can probably do it quite well. But if you're thinking about how do you grow, how do you deliver that sort of type of experience in a huge organisation, then technology can really help with that.
How do you balance the requirement for a people-centric onboarding approach with the need to tick boxes and maintain compliance?
I suppose the way that we balance it at Capgemini is the way that we do it is we have our recruitment team. We then have our offer management team that deal with all of that, maintaining compliance and doing all the checks and making sure the contracts are signed and everything. And then it goes to the pre-onboarding, which it then comes to my team, which is the onboarding team. I don't really do much around maintaining the compliance, to be honest. My main role within my job is to make sure that the new joiners have an immersive and engaging experience, and that when they join the company, they're excited, because there's nothing worse than joining a company and just ticking boxes and just filling out forms and doing processes. So the way that we do that, we do all the compliance stuff beforehand. It's all done through offer management, through our other department. And then when people come to me for day one, it is just all about that experience. It's, you know, so we make sure that day one is exciting for them. They can network. They do all of that good stuff, and that, I suppose, that's how we get the balance. They do all of the process stuff because it has to be done. But day one, we make sure we don't have any PowerPoint on day one. Literally nothing. We have I think we've got 2 slides in a whole day. We have kind of VP speakers that come. We have a panel, a bit like this, where people from different business areas join the panel and talk to the new joiners. So the new joiners get a very good overview of the whole company in day one. So people care because they're coming from the business, they're taking time out of their day to come and talk to these new joiners, and that's happening twice a month. So there's quite a lot of investment that's coming from the business, but because it's split out into each business area and we do it on a rota basis, it doesn't feel like it's that onerous for the person that's doing that, because they're not doing it every 2 weeks. They're probably doing it twice a year.
We work hand in hand with a recruitment team, obviously. We used to be basically one fused operation. We still work hand in hand. What we do is we don't allow the compliance stuff to get in the way. Yeah. So where we are right now is we have leaned the living hell out of the compliance thing to the point where, even at its most complex, it is quick, it is simple, straightforward and efficient. What we haven't yet done is fill the remaining gap. So now that we're so efficient with the annoying stuff, we've now got a large gap which we aim to fill with the experience and expand on that as a partnership. And that is a work in progress.
The best tactics for getting hiring manager buy-in initially before you have the metrics to prove it's worthwhile. So we want to do some crazy stuff with onboarding. It'll be amazing, and this is why.
Okay, the best tactics. I think, again, we need to begin with feedback. We were talking about that. So feedback can work 2 ways for you. Number one, it can tell you where the problem really is, if there is one, and we are very self-effacing in HR. If anyone says a bad thing, we just assume the whole world has ended and it's all horrible, when it's actually not the case, and we've tested it in the worst way, and we tend to find it's not nearly as bad as you think. So they're ready to talk to us about this, and they will have a contribution to make. And when we ask the business how they would like things to look, feel and act, we get quite a lot of value. So that getting of the buy-in is not as hard as you might think, because when we ask people, they tend to say, well, actually, it's okay. But then there's this thing that we'd like to say about us that is currently not being said. And that's the opportunity. And when we do that, that's when we get that buy-in where they start saying, well, actually, if we gave you a few quid, you could do that a little bit better. And we've actually had some quite good experience of that sort of partnership where we say to the business, it's mostly around recruitment campaigns, but it works just as well. We can do this for you. However, if you've got a little bit of budget, we could do that. And that's when they start to contribute, because they're not averse to it. And that's how we would do that, is we say to our business, who are our partners, we will say to them, look at what we're doing. We know you think it's basically okay. Would you like us to improve it? On what level are you interested? And then let's talk about what we can afford and what you can afford.
Excellent. Hugh, have you had to work with any of your clients around that? So actually helping them evidence the need to reinvent onboarding in their organisations and then getting the budget for it?
So there's two things. So one is getting the budget, and one is getting the buy-in. Because the hiring managers, if they're sitting there and they're totally happy with their readiness to perform and people turning up on the day they're supposed to turn up, there's very little impetus to do anything. But what you'll almost certainly have is hiring managers complaining. The most drastic one is people just not turning up. But even people where, oh God, I'm going to have to spend the whole week now explaining them how the coffee machine works or what have you. So if you just talk to your hiring managers, as Eric says, I'm sure you'll find areas where they can see that there's an issue that needs to be addressed. And then the buy-in side, certainly you can share data from other organisations just to show these are the hard business benefits of doing it. But even most, it goes back to the candidate experience conversation again. Especially in the areas of the business where they know they're struggling to find good people, just making that case for improving the candidate experience right the way along the pathway.
Right, last question then. This should be easy. People keep upvoting this one at the top. Abby, what technology do you use for your onboarding?
So again,
What technology is, if there's more than one?
The technology that we use for pre-onboarding is, as I've said, we work with I work with Hugh and Karen, and we use the Hollaroo platform. So we have something called the Be Ready portal, which on there has a ton of videos. It also has a number of different tiles, so they can learn different things about the organisation, and we can have a look at what tiles they have been clicking on. Have they been clicking on them at all, or haven't they? And if they haven't, then that raises that red flag that I think Hugh mentioned earlier. So what we do is if we've got someone joining on Monday and we realise that they've not actually even logged onto the portal, that pretty much tells us, well, either they're not really engaged, maybe they're not joining for some reason, but we just don't know it. So it gives us something to do about it. So what we then do is we chase that person up and say, we notice you haven't logged on. Is everything all right? Is there anything you need from us? Any support? That kind of thing. So more just checking in. And then we get our answer from there, whether or not they are actually joining us or not. So it basically means we're not put in a situation where on day one, we're expecting someone to arrive and they don't arrive. Also with the Be Ready portal, we have groups. So what that means is anybody that's joining on Monday, for example, we might have 30 new joiners on Monday. It allows them to talk to each other. So they can network with each other and say, oh, I'm joining on Monday too. Let's meet. Let's go for a coffee or whatever it is, so that they can start that networking very early on, because that's one of the things that's really important at Capgemini. We talk a lot about building your networks, and that's basically starting as they mean to go on. So that's just a bit about the Be Ready portal. But then on the actual day, we use technology. So we use the iPads, as I was saying. We are going to be using augmented reality. That's something that's coming in that I'm working on at the moment. And then we use videos. We use a lot of animation, so it's not lifeless. We have a lot of things that we do. Every video that we show, it's about 2 or 3 minutes. We don't really show any videos that are longer than 3 minutes, so we can keep people's attention. So the way that the day is built, it's very purposely built so that we're keeping everyone's attention constantly.
Eric, what tech are you using to power your onboarding process?
Well, at our present stage, we are very invested in our ATS. So on our table, we were talking about exploiting the technology, optimizing the technology. The technology is always evolving, and so we are doing our very best to catch up and then try and keep up. So at present, the service we're rendering is based within the ATS. It serves up documents for information, the odd form that needs to be filled, but not very many. So there's a limit to how much of that there is. That's where we are looking to expand our engagement in the pre-boarding stage. Because our ATS will actually do that, and we're not actually exploiting it to its best extent yet. And that's because before 3 years, before 3 years back, onboarding as we know it now was not a thing. But we've had our ATS since 2011. And it continues to evolve. So now we're looking to exploit it, to optimize it, and better use it for this, because we're already pretty decent as a recruiting operation. So it can add a bell or a whistle and make us maybe a teensy bit better, but we're not bad already.
Yeah.
But there is huge potential to engage more at different stages, including onboarding. So we're not done with that yet, but we're always watching the marketplace, and we know that we're very conscious of the emergence of complementary technologies that can help you build on what you're offering. We've done the EVP work. So at present, we're kind of oldish school, coming up to date. There's a lot more we can still do.